Shenandoah Valley on this fall afternoon, and I think we're going to have members on this webinar from all over the country. So welcome, welcome. The ALC Bridge is a place, and it is a place where educators, employers, and the workforce of tomorrow discuss and plan for a more connected world. So our topic today is very simple: careers in the language industry. The language industry. We often refer to it as the silent industry. Well, because we just don't make much noise. That's going to change. Because in fact, the language industry is dynamic, it's global, it's diverse, and it is large, employing millions around the world. We work to remove barriers, to ensure that people understand each other. We help world leaders to improve cooperation. We help judges find justice and scientists understand new research. We help small manufacturers find new markets, and we help multinationals acquire them. We help the marginalized find hope, and for humanity to find peace. Not a small task, but we're up to it, and we're so excited to have all of you participating today. To make it interesting, we have 3 speakers, each with a unique perspective. And I'd like you to consider the key aspect of each presentation: language skills, the ability to read or write or speak more than one language, the ability to understand not just the words, but the meaning, to communicate and reduce the emotional distance between people. Our first speaker is Jeff Beattie, head of localization at Mozilla, the makers of the well-known Firefox web browser. Jeff will be discussing how translation helps Mozilla serve more people around the world. Our second speaker is Amy Wade, Director of Training and Testing at LanguageLine Services, one of the world's largest over-the-phone interpreting services companies. And our third speaker is Lee Chung, and she works with Alexa at Amazon, and she's a language engineer. So this is our first webinar, and we're going to collect some data. And we're conducting 2 polls during the half hour, and I ask each of you to engage with us so that we can hear your thoughts and learn from your perspectives. So now, for our first speaker, let me give you Jeff from Mozilla.
Hi, everyone. I am the head of localization at Mozilla. I'm responsible for making sure that the open web is linguistically accessible to the people of the world. We localize Firefox, as well as a number of other products that we produce in over 100 languages. And we work with a dedicated community of volunteers who are very passionate about their language and passionate about open source technology in order to spread our mission and spread the benefits of the open web around the world. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about localization and just contextualize what that term actually means within the scope of language, and talk briefly about the careers available in localization, the skill sets that you would need, and how you might go about gaining some experience in localization. I really like this definition of localization. It is the cultural adaptation of a digital product for a local market. Digital product can mean a web app. It could mean a blog. It could mean a video, or even a piece of software or a mobile application on your phone. The whole goal of localization is to take what has been created in one culture and ensure that it can be properly utilized within a different cultural context, and one that is specifically targeted at an individual local market. Now, this includes many facets, but the three I want to focus on here are text manipulation, in-context testing, and coding. Text manipulation refers to really the act of processing the text that is written by developers or written by content creators. But it also has to do with ensuring that proper typography is applied depending on the language, that the right encodings are being used, that the right fonts are being used. And then it, of course, invariably involves translation. With in-context testing, that is primarily focused on ensuring that the translated text into the target language appear correctly within the user interface of the digital product. So that affects layout. As if you're active in translation, you're aware that typically when you translate something from a source language to a target language, there is a certain amount of text expansion that comes with that. And that can have detrimental effects or impact on the layout or the design of a piece of software. And so testing that text expansion to ensure that layout remains similar to what it is in the source language, ensuring that the appearance of the software, the color schema, any images that are included in there are culturally appropriate, as well as doing testing for semantic context. Usually within localization, translators are exposed to text to translate in isolation. They don't actually see where the text will appear in the user interface. They also don't know in what order it will appear. Some words that are single word may be translated as a noun, or they may be translated as a verb, but it won't be until it is actually put into the context of the user interface that you as the translator would be able to see how that term is actually being used. So in-context testing of the software with your translations in it is critical to ensuring high quality, semantically sound translation. And then finally, coding. Coding involves making sure that the digital product itself can be localized. That whole process is called internationalization. It is the enabler for you to go about adapting your product to a given local market, and involves a number of different skills. You may need to become familiar with different software platforms, with different web technologies, and each will have its own set of processes and best practices for internationalization. XML, the extensible markup language, is a common standard within our industry. Being familiar with that is important. Understanding how software reads variables and placeholders, and how, when they appear within translatable text, how you should approach them. And then finally, design. Depending on the language you're working in, the entire design of your digital product may need to be adjusted. A good example is any right to left language would also require a right to left design. So having skills in all of these areas are very important if you wish to be successful and have a career in localization. In order to gain experience, I would really encourage you to seek out free and open source software projects like Mozilla or like Linux. Localization Lab is a group. It's a nonprofit organization that has actually collected open source projects over the years and provides localization for them via a community effort. They are very reputable, and I would highly encourage you to look at them and begin contributing to those projects. There are other areas where you can go for crowdsourcing opportunities: Facebook, Transifex, Crowdin, OneSky. All of these offer people seeking to get their foot in the door the opportunity to gain some experience within this field. Anyway, that's all for me. I think that there's time for a Q&A, a brief Q&A, right?
Oh, absolutely, Jeff. Thank you so much. I am just fascinated by the idea of a wonderful career like yours with language skills. Jessica, do we have any questions?
We have not received any questions yet, but if you do come across questions throughout the rest of the presentations, please feel free to email ALC at info@alcus.org, and Kathleen or I will facilitate your questions to the most appropriate presenter.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ready for our next speaker. And our next speaker is Amy Wade. And she comes from an industry that I am perhaps the most familiar with, and that is accessing interpreters over the phone in real time. And so I am very excited to have Amy present to us next, because she has all sorts of incredible opportunities for language majors and language students. So Amy, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Very nice to be speaking with you. I'd also like to mention that I'm joined by our Vice President of Human Resources, Frank Perry, today, who has been very active with the Association of Language Companies. I'm going to start out by talking about sort of my path in my career, because it is a path that's available to people who love languages and are interested in interpretation. As you can see from my title, I'm the Director of Training and Testing for Interpreters at LanguageLine Solutions. You heard Kathleen mention that we are the world leader in over-the-phone interpretation. And of course, we actually help people communicate any way we can. So there could be translation, there could be video interpretation, there could be over-the-phone interpretation, and I'm going to talk about all of those possibilities today. So my path was just, I had been studying at the Monterey Institute of International Studies, which is now known as the Middlebury Institute of International Studies. I began as a Spanish interpreter, and I was working with LanguageLine Solutions as an over-the-phone interpreter. So that's where you have a three-way call, and you are interpreting between two people. One person is speaking Spanish, in my case, and the other person is speaking English. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that modality as we get through this presentation. I then stayed with LanguageLine Solutions as I was promoted to interpreter recruitment, which is great. It's important to realize that you can leverage what you know about language and interpretation into sort of regular business positions as well, because people who have the special skills that a recruiter would need, but also have the knowledge of language and interpretation, makes for the perfect selection process. So I then became the manager of that effort, and was later promoted to the Director of Training and Testing, which is what I'm doing now. And I've been with LanguageLine for 20 years. And in all of that time, I have had an amazing opportunity to work with thousands of linguists, which is really exciting. We're working with over 240 different languages, and so just the experiences in meeting people and working with language. If you love language, this is an amazing opportunity. I just want to show you a quick visual here about what's happening in the language services market, because you guys are all interested in exploring jobs in the language services market. And as you can see quite clearly from this visual, it is growing. It has been growing, and it continues to grow. And so despite what you may hear out there, I don't know what you're hearing, but it is an industry that will have many jobs in future years. So, a career in interpretation. Let's talk a little bit about that. As I say, the need for access to qualified interpreters continues to grow as the language services access industry grows. There's a difference between language interpretation and translation, and this is some insider info, right? You'll need to know. Usually, colloquially, I think you know that translation is what people talk about when they're talking about two languages. But in the biz, we refer to oral communication as interpretation, and written communication as translation specifically. Now we have different modes of interpretation, and this is important because it actually involves developing different skills in addition to the language skills that you have. We have consecutive interpretation. That's when one person talks and you listen, and then when they finish a segment, you interpret that into the other language, and then the other person responds. And you go back and forth between the two people. Usually, you know, there's some note taking, or you know, there are pauses and that sort of thing to make communication happen. Simultaneous is the other mode of interpretation, whereby a person is probably like giving a speech, or they have a lot to say, and you are interpreting right on their heels. So they're talking, and you imagine yourself in a booth or next to them, and you're interpreting in real time right behind what they say. So you can imagine what kind of skills that would involve. And then there's sight translation, specifically called sight translation. This is when you have a written document and you are interpreting it or translating it on the spot for a person. So you're reading in one language, but you're interpreting it into the other language in real time on the spot. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of settings that are available for interpreters for further exploration. So a conference setting, if you can imagine like the United Nations or the European Union and all the business that goes on there, think about, you've probably seen people in the booth, for example, at the United Nations, where people are having conferences. And the interpreters, there may be interpreters working in several different languages, but they're probably listening to the speaker and they're doing their interpretation into some equipment so that the people who need to hear the conference in that language are able to do so. So they're kind of like watching the speaker, and then they're listening to what the person is saying in the other language in real time. So that would use, of course, a lot of simultaneous interpretation. And then if you can imagine in the European Union, you know, they have all of the different countries there. They have laws about businesses who operate in more than 2 countries in the union. And so there's a lot of opportunities for people to interpret business transactions, shareholders meetings, things like that. So you can imagine that you would also need quite a bit of expertise in that content. And that's real important when you're thinking about the kind of language that you know and the kind of language you would have to learn in order to work in that kind of a setting. Generally, conference settings and this type of interpretation do require a bit of a higher level of learning. So you'll find a lot of people who do attend the Middlebury Institute shooting for this type of a position. They're getting a master's degree to be able to do this kind of work. We also have on-site settings. And so if you can imagine at a hospital or in a court of law, on-site simply means that you're there in person. And you could be doing several different modes of interpretation. There's a lot of consecutive interpretation that happens like this. Sight translation and simultaneous, all 3 are used in the court system. So it could be a trial, or it could be a deposition. So if you know what those things are, you can imagine the different settings. A sight translation is very popular here because there's so much legal documentation that has to be read or has to be transmitted to a defendant or a plaintiff. And you can also imagine then there's a whole lot of jargon that has to be learned, right? A lot of language that has to be learned to work in both of these fields. But these are 2 typical fields where you find on-site interpretation, where you actually physically show up. Then we have over-the-phone interpretation, which of course it's on demand. It's extremely convenient for the people who use it, and it also creates opportunities for interpreters to work from their homes, which is kind of an exciting prospect and very different from the other 2 settings for interpretation. And this one actually covers a wide range of topics. So almost anything that you can imagine that a person would need to do in their daily lives, but they can't quite do it because they don't feel they speak English well enough. It's not usually that the person speaks zero English. In fact, here's another pro tip, something that you want to know. We call people who don't speak English as their primary language LEPs. That stands for Limited English Proficiency. It's a government term widely used to describe people who need a little bit of assistance with language when they're trying to access services. So you'll find healthcare, law, insurance, finance, education, business, government, 911 and emergency services, almost anything that you can imagine a person needing to do just to conduct their daily life. You'll find this available for over the phone. So you can imagine this is a great place to start. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But it also just the breadth of knowledge that you would gain as an over-the-phone interpreter is pretty exciting. And video interpretation is actually, it's just like over-the-phone interpretation in a certain sense, but it's just an exciting new way to be able to engage in interpretation. It's still on demand. With the improvements in technology and video, it's great because it's almost as good as being there, right? Because you get all the visual cues and you kind of know what's going on. People love video interpretation, but we're able to do video interpretation for all these same industries. So the topics are wide ranging. So those are kind of the different areas where you might consider interpreting. I also wanted to mention that, you know, you can start out in interpretation and really gain a lot of experience. And some people build their entire career as an interpreter or a translator, and some people do both, although they are very different skill sets. But especially in the case of a place like Language Line Solutions, where, you know, in many ways it's a company like any other company or business, and you can parlay language knowledge and knowledge of being an interpreter to becoming a tester of interpreters, a trainer of interpreters, quality assurance. That's people who listen to the interpretation and make sure that the quality is at a high standard. We have supervisors. We have implementation specialists that help clients to learn about interpretation, because just like you're learning about it now, even people who know they need help communicating, they need help also understanding how to work with an interpreter. Of course, there's traditional roles, sales and marketing, information technology, almost anything you can imagine in the traditional business. Knowledge of interpretation is very important for large language access companies like Language Line Solutions and the others.
Wow, Amy, I'm breathless. This is absolutely fantastic, and I thank you so much. I would like to know if we have any questions that anybody has before I introduce our third speaker.
Yes, we do. This is from our friend Evan, and this is for Amy. Amy, I work with students who major in a foreign language at a public comprehensive university. How would you recommend guiding undergraduate or graduate students to acquire short-term or long-term internships or co-op experiences?
Well, internships. Internships are usually actually advertised on the website. So I would get to know the different language access companies. Language Line Solutions is one. I can provide a list of others as well to help. But even if you just type in keywords, you'll find it. Usually there's a career page, and that's a great way to get an internship. Knowing somebody like me also helps. So networking is also good. So hit me up later.
I'm going to have to introduce our third speaker, and I'm proud to introduce Lee Chung, and she is a language engineer. And I got to just say, that's my favorite topic in terms of career possibilities. Whoever thought language engineer would be a job? She works with Alexa, the Amazon's Alexa project, and I'm going to give her the microphone right away because we're already at 2:25.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chung. So I am language engineer at Amazon. My topic today will be like 3 components. The first one, I will introduce a little bit about my job. So like what language engineer do at Amazon. And the second, I'll talk a little bit about like what skill kits you need to be a language engineer, or any like other similar positions. Third, then I move forward to the career path as a language engineer, and also like similar job titles at Amazon and also in other like tech companies. Language engineer. So basically, like this is a role in a big team. Usually, at Amazon, like a team will have like language engineers, research scientists, and software engineers. So different these positions are responsible for different works for Alexa. So like a research scientist will be working on the science work, like the modeling work, and the software engineers will be building the infrastructures, the tools that research scientists and language engineers will be using. So for language engineers, usually like we use our like linguistic background to design the language for the statistic models. So for example, like if you have a bunch of features you want Alexa to learn, and we have a bunch of utterances, so how can the model learn the language? So language engineer's job is to design the language in a way that the statistical model can understand. For example, like how are you gonna deal with ambiguity in language? This is a very common problem for in language. So you need to deal with that. So the statistical model will understand, this is meaning 1, this is meaning 2. So this is one major thing for language engineers at Amazon. And the other thing we do is we call it user research. So you for some features, particularly those like new features available at Alexa, so we won't have a lot of like utterances. So then we need to create like some situations or scenarios where like we assume that the customers will use the language. So in that case, like you need to think about how to create authentic like situations to elicit the utterances that will be useful to train the statistical model. So those are like 2 major things that we are working at Amazon as a language engineer. And I would say like a linguistics background is very helpful for this position, because otherwise, like compared to research scientists and software engineers, so sometimes they don't have a good like linguistic intuition, so they don't understand how to design the language. But we do. We understand the syntax, the semantics, or the pragmatics of the language. So this is very important as a skill. In addition to those like to the language skills and linguistic background, I would say it will be wonderful if you have like some technical skills. For example, if you have experience in natural language processing, or if you know some programming languages like Python, it would definitely be like a bonus in the job market, particularly for those like tech companies. For example, like if you have time, you can definitely go to take some online courses. There are so many resources out there, so you can go to take some courses online and apply these skills to your work, like do some simple natural language processing tasks. And if you have like questions, if we don't have time to deal with a lot of questions or talk about some topics, feel free to reach out, and I am happy to help or answer the questions you have. So the last one I'd like to talk about is the career development at this role, because you will have a lot of opportunities to work with research scientists. So if you are interested, you can go to a more technical route. You can also try some like scientist roles in the future if you are interested, and also you have a strong like background in machine learning. The other way is like you're gonna be working with a lot of like product teams, so you'll be working with managers. Definitely you will learn a lot of like management skills. So if you are interested in those like managerial roles, you can go with like a technical management role, So this is also very popular at Amazon. My time is kind of up, like someone is waiting outside of this conference room. But as I mentioned, feel free to reach out. I am happy to answer all the questions you have.
Thank you very much, Lee. We really appreciate it, and welcome to ALC Bridge. We will be very much in touch with you. Thank you.
If you have any topics that you guys think would be great for ALC Bridge Webinar Series or ALC, please feel free to email the address that you see on your screen right now, info@alcus.org. We would love to hear from you folks.
Excellent. I do have a minute or two if people are willing to stay, if there are questions that would like to be posed now. Take a question or two.
Absolutely. We do have a quick question for our friend Jeff. This is from one of our friends, Ceci. Her question was, do you have any localization online training courses you could recommend?
Great question. The one online training course, or at least free online training course that I'm aware of, was developed by Google, and I believe it is on the Udemy platform. Yeah, I believe that you can find it there. They produced that a number of, well, yeah, a couple of years ago, and I've not personally witnessed it, but I've heard great things about it. Boy, I can't think of any online courses, but there is a wealth of information online about localization. Mozilla, we've produced a number of documents discussing localization best practices for web apps and the open web. And it's fairly easy to find information about best practices in internationalization and other topics within localization.
Thank you, Jeff. Opportunities for our educators, it sounds like. I would like to, at this point, bring our webinar to a conclusion by giving very, very special recognition to Richard Antoine, Adam Wooten, and Jessica Bratton for making this incredible webinar happen. It looks so easy when it's done and when it's good, but boy, is it hard to get here. So thank you, Richard, Adam, Jessica, from the bottom of my heart. And Kevin McGuire of Atlas for sponsoring us. And it's now my absolute full joy to welcome you to our brand new website. So I leave you this afternoon with a view of the ALC Bridge platform. Hooray! www.alcbridge.org. Yes, ma'am.
Please take the next 5 to 10 minutes to discuss what ALC Bridge is, how it can benefit our students, linguistic experts, and employers, and how universities can best utilize ALC Bridge.
Yes, I'll be happy to do that, Jessica. The whole concept, the whole reason, the raison d'etre, if I may say, for the ALC Bridge is that we find that we needed to come together as employers, educators, in order to prepare students for the incredible jobs that the employers have. So it's simple. We are an industry that's not well known, and we create incredible opportunities and incredible careers using language skills. And we hoped to give you just a sort of a sense of it this afternoon during the webinar. But the bridge is the place where we're going to make it happen, because someone wants online courses in localization. Well, the educators among us can start to work on that, preparing the students to take those courses to be able to take the jobs that the employers have in place. So that really is the idea, and we built this platform for you. For each of you. As you go through it this afternoon on your own, you'll see there's a place for educators, a place for employers, a place for students, there's a place for events, resources, and there is a job board. And this will be a job board that is dedicated 100% to jobs, careers, and opportunities in the language industry. It's the first of its kind, we hope, we think, and we've worked hard to put this platform in place, and it's going to be what we make it now. And the work is ahead in terms of really filling it out and making it exciting and ours. So opportunity for educators to maybe get some assistance from employers about what kinds of courses to design, what sort of programs to offer, opportunity for students to say, where do I need to go? How do I prepare myself? And on and on and on. But simple, simple. Educators, employers, for the benefit of students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Your presence and your guidance throughout this whole entire process has been extremely impactful. I can speak for everybody that's on this webinar. We appreciate all the efforts that every single committee member, ALC member, volunteer has put into getting ALC Bridge launched and ready to start the revolution. So please, everybody, the link to the ALC Bridge website was just shared in the comments. Please feel free to put that into your URL Google search, go through our website, join ALC Bridge while membership is complimentary, and let's all get out there and make sure we're connecting students with careers in the language industry. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.